This is a difficult question. It asks us to look at a world that thankfully never came to be. What if Nazi Germany had won the Second World War? The question is not just about battles and borders. It is about the very fabric of life itself. It touches politics, it touches society, it touches the culture we take for granted. To understand this alternate reality, we must begin at the moment when our history diverged from this darker path. We must follow a clear line of events, from cause to effect, to see how such a world could have emerged from the ashes of a different kind of war. It requires us to imagine a timeline where the familiar victories of the Allies turned into defeats. The critical turning point can be placed with some precision. It is the period of 1940 to 1941. Imagine a scenario where the German military campaign in France is even more devastatingly successful. Imagine the British Expeditionary Force is not evacuated at Dunkirk, but is largely captured. Under immense pressure, and perhaps with a change in leadership, Great Britain is forced into a negotiated peace, an armistice that effectively removes it from the war. This single event changes everything. Without its key European ally, the United States, still wary of foreign entanglement, chooses to remain neutral. The Soviet Union, seeing Germany's unchecked power, reaffirms its non-aggression pact, buying time and creating a fragile truce. By 1942, the map of Europe is redrawn not by Allied liberators, but by German victors. This is our starting point. From this single, pivotal change, a new and terrible history unfolds. The German Reich now stands as the undisputed master of the European continent. Its leaders do not need to fight a war on two fronts. Instead, they can turn their full attention inward. They can begin the long and methodical process of building their 1,000-year empire. The scope of their ambition is total. They seek to reshape politics. They seek to control the daily lives of hundreds of millions. They seek to forge a new culture based on their rigid ideology. The world we know would have vanished. What follows is an exploration of that world. It is a step-by-step examination of the consequences that flow from that initial German victory. We will look at the immediate political changes in the 1940s as the new order was imposed. We will then consider the decades that followed as the regime worked to consolidate its power over every aspect of existence. This includes the laws that governed people, the propaganda they consumed, and the very thoughts they were permitted to have. With military victory secured in the West, the 1940s became a decade of political consolidation for the Nazi regime. The first step was to formalize their dominance through a series of treaties pacts. These were not negotiations between equals. They were dictates handed down from Berlin. France was partitioned, with the northern half under direct military occupation, the south governed by a compliant puppet regime. Belgium, the Netherlands were absorbed into the Greater German Reich as administrative districts. Their national identities were suppressed. Their resources were now Germany's to command. New borders were drawn with an architect's cold precision, designed to maximize German control and economic benefit. The political landscape across the continent was systematically leveled. All existing political parties were declared illegal. Labor unions were disbanded, replaced with a single, state-controlled labor front. The free press ceased to exist overnight. Newspapers, radio stations were either shut down or taken over by the Ministry of Propaganda. Their new role was simple: to transmit the official pronouncements of the state to build support for the new order. In non-annexed countries, local leaders loyal to the Reich were installed. These men owed their power entirely to Berlin. It was a swift and brutal transformation. To enforce this new structure, the state relied on an ever-expanding security apparatus. The Gestapo, other secret police organizations, established offices in every major city. Paris, Copenhagen. Their network of informants grew rapidly. Fear and opportunism led ordinary citizens to report on their neighbors. Any hint of dissent, any grumbled complaint in a breadline could lead to a visit in the middle of the night. People learned to speak in whispers. They learned to trust no one outside their immediate family. The goal was not just to punish opposition, but to create a climate of fear so pervasive that the thought of resistance would not even form. Propaganda was the constant companion to this terror. It was everywhere. It blared from radios in public squares, its confident tones drowning out all other sounds. It was plastered on posters that covered every available wall, showing images of strong workers, happy families, wise leaders. Children in schools were handed new textbooks that erased the histories of their own nations and replaced them with a new narrative. This story was one of German greatness and the destiny of the Reich to lead Europe. The repetition was relentless. It was designed to wear down the spirit, to make the new reality seem not only permanent but also natural and even desirable. As the years turned into decades, the Nazi regime moved from conquest to administration. The period from the 1950s to the 1970s was about making the new order permanent. The goal was to consolidate power so deeply that it became an unshakable part of European life. This meant creating a new generation that had never known anything else. Education was the primary tool for this grand project. The curriculum was standardized across the continent. History was taught through the lens of Nazi ideology. Biology was taught through the lens of Nazi ideology. Mathematics was taught through the lens of Nazi ideology. Children learned of racial hierarchies as scientific fact. They memorized the key dates of the Reich's triumphs. They recited pledges of loyalty to its leader. The system was designed to produce obedient subjects, not critical thinkers. The legal system was completely overhauled to serve the state. The concept of individual rights was abolished. Laws were no longer based on principles of justice. Laws were based on the will of the Führer. Laws were based on the perceived needs of the Reich. New categories of crimes were created. It became illegal to listen to foreign radio broadcasts. It became illegal to tell jokes about state officials. It became illegal to associate with individuals deemed enemies of the state. Courts became instruments of political enforcement. Trials were often mere formalities, with verdicts decided in advance. This legal framework ensured the state could interfere in any aspect of a person's life, at any time, for any reason. This era also saw the perfection of social control. The chaotic violence of the 1940s gave way to systematic, bureaucratic repression. Society was organized into a rigid hierarchy. Party membership became essential for anyone hoping for a good job. Party membership became essential for anyone hoping for a decent apartment. Party membership became essential for anyone hoping for a university education for their children. This created a new class of loyalists with a vested interest in maintaining the system. For everyone else, life was a constant exercise in caution. People were watched by the secret police. People were watched by party officials. People were watched by colleagues at work. This atomized society broke the bonds of community and made organized opposition nearly impossible. Huge architectural projects became a physical symbol of the regime's permanence. Stark architectural drawing of a massive neoclassical government building. Grand neoclassical buildings rose in major cities to awe the populace. Massive stadiums were built for state rallies and youth parades. These structures were made of granite. These structures were made of marble. They were intended to last for 1,000 years. They were a constant physical reminder of who was in charge. The landscape itself was remade in the image of the Reich. This was not just about building a state. It was about building a civilization designed to erase all that had come before it. For the ordinary person, daily life in the consolidated Reich was a mixture of routine and fear. On the surface, things might appear normal. People went to work. Children went to school. Families gathered in the evenings. But underneath this surface was a constant, low-level anxiety. Every action was weighed. Every word was considered. The wrong opinion shared with the wrong person could have devastating consequences. This constant self-censorship became a part of the personality, a reflex as natural as breathing. People learned to wear a public mask of conformity. They kept their true thoughts locked away. This created a profound sense of isolation, even when surrounded by others. Family life was no longer a private sphere. The state actively sought to intervene. Youth organizations demanded children's time and loyalty. Hitler Youth, equivalent groups in occupied territories. Children were taught their first duty was to the state, not their parents. Children were encouraged to report on parents expressing disloyal sentiments. The home turned from sanctuary into potential danger. Religious practice was heavily controlled. Some churches were co-opted, sermons praising the regime. Others were suppressed, leaders arrested, congregations forced to meet in secret. Culture and the arts became instruments of the state. The vibrant, experimental pre-war culture was gone, replaced by officially sanctioned art, simple, heroic, nationalistic. Books promoting democracy. Books promoting individualism. Banned and burned. Music had to be tonally conservative. Music free of foreign influences. Films glorified military victories. Films praised the purity of the homeland. Films vilified the Reich's enemies, a sterile, monotonous cultural landscape, a world without irony, without complexity, without dissent. The creative spirit suffocated under political dogma. The regime's ideology permeated every corner of society. Laws based on race and origin decided a person's worth and rights. Minority groups stripped of property, stripped of citizenship, stripped of freedom, marginalized, segregated, subjected to forced labor, relocated to guarded ghettos and camps. For the majority, the message was clear: conformity and loyalty bought a degree of security. But this security was fragile. It depended on staying within the state's lines, and never questioning the fundamental injustice on which the entire system was built. Occupied territories were reoriented to serve Germany. Factories there produced components for the German war machine. Farmland supplied food for the German population. An economic empire built on extraction and exploitation. For the average worker, hard labor, limited rewards, wages controlled by the state. No right to strike. Workers directed to essential industries. Sometimes moved far from home. The regime boasted of eliminating unemployment, but it did so by forcing people into state-run labor projects or into military service. Rationing of food, clothing, consumer goods. Rationing became permanent for most outside the elite. The economy produced guns, not butter. The masses' quality of life reflected that priority. Technology and research were harnessed to state goals. Huge investment flowed into select fields: rocketry, jet propulsion, nuclear research. These technologies maintained military superiority. Vast resources went into surveillance, advanced listening devices, new tracking methods, early data processing systems. The Autobahn network was expanded to move troops rapidly across the continent. But this innovation had a high cost. Scientific inquiry was crushed by ideology. Theoretical physics and other Jewish science were discouraged. Many top minds fled Europe. Others were removed from their posts. The resulting brain drain stifled true innovation. The Reich could excel at engineering projects and at military hardware, but it lagged in creative, theoretical sciences. Powerful but brittle economy, optimized for control and military production, not consumer welfare, not long-term growth, not the dynamic innovation of a free society. This is the story of the world we narrowly escaped. The German victory in Europe did not bring world peace. It created a new and deeply unstable global arrangement. By the 1960s, the world was divided into three major spheres of influence, locked in a tense, multipolar Cold War. Greater German Reich controlled continental Europe from the Atlantic to the Ural Mountains. Its influence extended into the Middle East, securing access to vital oil resources. The Reich was a massive industrial power, yet insular and paranoid, constantly guarding its borders. The second great power was the United States. America had stayed out of the European War and dominated the Western Hemisphere. It led a bloc in North America and in South America, These nations were bound by economic ties and opposition to the Reich. The United States kept a powerful military, including a nuclear arsenal. The Atlantic became a fortified frontier patrolled by fleets and submarines. There was little trade or travel between the blocs. They existed as two separate hostile worlds. The third sphere was the Japanese Empire in East Asia. Japan controlled China and Southeast Asia. It was a powerful, militaristic state. Its relationship with Germany was complex. Nominal allies united against the United States, but their strategic interests often clashed, creating a fragile partnership. This three-way standoff, Germany, the United States, Japan, defined international politics. It was a world of constant tension, espionage, and proxy conflicts. Those proxy wars were fought in Africa and in South Asia as each superpower vied for resources and influence. The conflicts of WWII never truly ended. They morphed into permanent, low-level warfare. In the occupied Soviet territories, a brutal partisan war simmered for decades. German forces were tied down fighting insurgents, a draining conflict with no end in sight. The British Empire, though defeated in Europe, survived in reduced form with Commonwealth nations like Canada, Australia, India, forming a loose alliance with the United States. This global stalemate, held by the threat of nuclear annihilation, was the war's long-term legacy. It was a peace built not on justice, but on fear. Even in a world under total control, the human spirit of defiance was not extinguished. It was simply forced underground. Resistance in the Greater German Reich was a quiet, dangerous, and often lonely struggle. It was not a war of open battles, but of small, courageous acts. It was the illegal printing press in a cellar, turning out leaflets with real news from the outside world. It was a secret network that helped fugitives escape across guarded borders. It was a teacher who quietly contradicted the official textbook, or a priest who delivered a coded sermon of hope to a trusted few. These acts carried the ultimate risk, but they kept a flicker of truth alive in the darkness. Over the decades, these scattered embers of resistance might begin to connect. Exiled communities in the United States and Britain would work to support these internal networks. They would broadcast radio programs into Europe, sending messages of encouragement and smuggling information back and forth. Within the Reich itself, the very success of the regime could plant the seeds of its own decay. A new generation, raised on propaganda, might grow cynical and disillusioned. The stark contrast between the promised utopia and the grim reality of their lives could lead to unrest. The constant need for force to rule over so many unwilling peoples was a fundamental weakness, a crack in the foundation of the thousand-year Reich. The moral cost of living in such a world was immense for both the oppressed and the oppressors. For millions, survival meant making terrible compromises. It meant staying silent in the face of injustice. It meant joining a party organization to feed one's family. It meant turning a blind eye to the suffering of neighbors. These daily choices eroded the soul and created a society sick with guilt and fear. The regime's policies, especially those based on racial ideology, inflicted unimaginable suffering on millions. The memory of this great crime would haunt the continent, a wound that could never truly heal, whether it was acknowledged or denied. Reflecting on this alternate timeline brings us to a simple, powerful conclusion. History is not inevitable. It is the sum of human choices. The world we inhabit was secured by the immense sacrifice of a generation that chose to fight against tyranny. They chose to believe in freedom, democracy, and the value of every individual life. Imagining a world where they had failed is a sobering exercise. It reminds us that these values are not guaranteed. They are fragile, and they must be defended in every generation. The darkness we have imagined here serves as a stark warning, a reminder of what was at stake, and a profound lesson in the enduring importance of choosing hope over fear and liberty over control.